Good afternoon to everyone. Myself, Dr. Sonal Mehta from Intas, Lead Medical Advisor Intas. And Intas Pharmaceutical Company is a leading pharma company having strong presence in fertility business. It is headquartered in India with presence in 70 countries across the globe. And being a science-driven company and to engage you all during this COVID-19 outbreak, Intas Women Health has organized this webinar under the leadership of Mr. Satpathy and Mr. Janardhan. I welcome you all to the webinar on frozen cycle protocol given by eminent faculty Dr. Shweta Mittal Gupta. You all are requested to put your questions through the chat box. Dr. Shweta, she is a senior consultant, Center of IVF and Human Reproduction, Sir Gangaram Hospital, Delhi, editor, Indian Fertility Society, treasurer, AOGD 2020, credited for her first pregnancy from frozen third cycle, North India. To her, she is recipient of Economic Times Award of Inspiring Obstetrician, Gynecologist, and IVF Specialist, Vigyan Vardhan Award, Foxy Ethicon Traveling Fellowship, First Fellow, National Board Reproductive Medicine, and she is peer reviewer of Journal of Assisted Reproduction Genetics, Journal OBGY India. Not but the least, she is teacher to fellows and postgraduates. With this, I welcome Dr. Madam Shweta Mittal Gupta. We have also with us Dr. Manal, Professor Manal. She is Chief Infertility ART Specialist and Dean of High Institute of ART, Baghdad. I welcome you, Madam Dr. Banal. Over to you, ma'am.
Welcome. Thank you for introducing myself, and thank you for organizing this lecture and meeting the professor for discussing these important subjects.
Thank you so much. Can I take over?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and my greetings to Dr. Manal, to all the delegates who have been, joining in and who will join in soon. The task which was given to me was to talk on preparing endometrium for frozen embryo transfer. If we see the paradigm, there has been a huge shift in our, thought processes and our working patterns when it comes to embryo transfer. I very clearly remember about 15 years back, I think there would be 70 to 80% of fresh embryo transfers, and about 30% cycles would be frozen embryo transfer. And in 2020, if I analyze my data, my center data, then we have about 60% frozen embryo transfer cycles and about 40% fresh embryo transfer cycles. So this is the change. And this change has been brought in, I think, majorly by the freezing technology, which is vitrification, and excellent survival on thawing these embryos if you have the good finesse to vitrification, and then your program can be successful. In my center, we are performing about 60 to 70% elective and selective single embryo transfer. So when I'm talking of FET, what is very important is an accurate synchronization of endometrium and embryo, which is the key to performing an FET. So the question which arises is now, since we have indulged so much into frozen embryo transfer cycle, then what is the optimal endometrial preparation when we are talking of an FET? So this is a small chart which I made, that this is the broad categories for endometrial preparation. Number one, you need to judge that whether your women are ovulatory naturally or they are anovulatory. If they are ovulatory, then you can, actually go for a natural cycle. And in the natural cycle, we will be discussing two types of cycle. One is a true natural cycle and the other is the modified natural cycle. So they are called NC-FET, and the other one will be called modified NC-FET. Now, if your women are anovulatory, so then you have to, think that is her hypothalamo-pituitary axis working or is it not working? If it is working, for example, we are looking, suppose let's consider the other scenario. We are looking at premature ovarian failure. We are looking at donor recipient cycles where the woman does not ovulate herself. Then the option would be hormone replacement therapy. We would be landing up giving estrogen and progesterone. But the other hand, anovulation could also be women who have PCOS. So there, in those kind of women, we could go ahead with ovulation induction. We have drugs like clomiphene and letrozole, or we could use low-dose gonadotropin. And slowly, I will discuss every regime and the clinical tips. This is what I had decided that we'll be discussing in this webinar today. So now, which method for whom? Which I said, if you are dealing with premature ovarian failure, then the only regime what you have is estrogen followed by progesterone. You cannot do any other things. But if you have functioning ovaries, then you can choose the different methods, which I have just mentioned: natural cycle, modified natural cycles. We can even go on HRT. You can do an ovulation induction, and then you can choose what suits best for your patient. So coming to hormone replacement therapy, now originally, way back in 1996, it was basically developed to allow transfers in a donor-recipient cycle, and thus HRT protocol was the most proven to be successful in general population. So the first question, what comes in our mind, then if that is the most universally accepted therapy, then do you think that in all the cycles we should give HRT and get away with it? We don't need to learn other protocols. But then, of course, the disadvantages could be increased cost, inconvenience to the patient as compared to a natural cycle. But the biggest effect, what really bothers me, is adverse effects associated with estrogens, which is thrombotic events, and especially be very careful in giving oral estrogen to your patients if they have high BMI. So it is very important that you should have a very good consent form. We have it in our center, which mentions the side effect of thrombotic events while you put on estrogen. Before starting patients on estrogen, look at their weight, their diabetic status, their hypertension status, and ask for any family history of thrombosis. And if they are smokers, very heavy smokers, I think the general caution, what you take when you start OC pills is the same what you would be doing for women with estrogen. And it is always worthwhile to have a consent form signed so that tomorrow, if they land up with some kind of a complication, you are medico-legally safe. So what are the next question is, yes, if HRT is the most commonly used protocol, then what are the routes of estrogen? So first, oral. So I'm talking in terms of what is available in India, and I think by and large in the world, we have estradiol valerate and we have estradiol hemihydrate. They are available as 1 milligram and 2 milligram tablets. The usual starting dose is anywhere between 4 milligrams, and the maximum dose what you can go up to is about 12 milligrams. So if you're using a 2 milligram tablet, you can start with 2 milligram twice daily at 12 hourly interval. You can increase it to 3 times at 8 hourly interval. Or if the endometrium is really resistant and you want to increase the dose, then you can do 2 tablets 3 times daily, and that comes to 12 milligram. Now, vaginal, this option could be available in any of your countries, though it's not an option available in India, where you have micronized estrogen and you have 1 milligram tablet and 2 milligram. I know the brand, it is available by the name Estrace most of the times in other countries. But if you have, then you can use vaginal micronized estrogen. However, valerate and hemihydrate are for oral use. Now coming to transdermal. So before my presentation, I had a small chat with Dr. Manal, and she was keen in knowing that how is the transdermal gel being used in India. So yes, it was introduced a couple of years back, and I think we have enough confidence on this drug, and we have been using it pretty frequently in our patients. I think in my cryo-ET cycles, about 40% of patients do have either as a standalone agent or along with oral estrogen. If I feel that on oral estrogen, my patient is not forming a good endometrium, then instead of increasing the oral dose, I would like to add a transdermal gel and give her a different method of absorption, and possibly that will work better as compared to just keep on increasing the oral dose. So now it is available. I mean, the product which is available by Intas is in a pump form. So you could either get it in a tube form or a pump form. Now, if I'm talking of pump, then one pump is actually equal to about 1 milligram estradiol valerate tablet. Now, in the morning when I was, interacting with personals from Intas, they said we can use up to 10 pumps in a day. So my clinical experience is that I have used up to 6 pumps per day. So 2 pumps in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 2 in the evening. The next question which was asked to me is that how do you apply it? So basically, we know that estrogens are they are hydrophobic, so basically fat soluble. They will be absorbed better if you apply it in an area where there is more fat. So either I will tell the woman to apply it on the abdomen, she could apply it on the thigh, or she could apply it on the inner side of the arm. Now, when you pump that drug, then it is better to just take it with your 2 fingers and then liberally apply it on the area wherever you have selected, and let it air dry. And in about 10 minutes, it dries up. Rather than taking the whole drug on your palm or smearing all your fingers, then effectively you are wasting some drug, and the amount of drug which would be reaching the place where it is to be applied would be a bit less. Now, type of estrogen and route does not make a difference, of course, in pregnancy outcome, which was published in 2010. So whether you choose oral or you choose vaginal or you choose transdermal, have confidence in your drugs. My only one word of caution that I was asked, that where I would not use oral drugs. So where I would not ask is if my patients have had deranged liver enzymes. I am very skeptical using oral, estrogens in them. I would be, if my patients are not tolerating oral estrogen because they sometimes cause a lot of gastritis, then I will change over to micronized. And in patients with thrombotic events, either I will go to oral Ovulogen's natural cycle, or maybe I can consider a lower dose of transdermal gel as compared to oral drugs. So priming of estrogen, what is the titration dose? If you have micronized estradiol, and if you look at 0.75 milligram, then it is equal to 1 pump of the drug, which is a transdermal, which gives you 1.25 grams of gel. And this 1.25 gram is either equivalent to 0.75 milligrams of micronized estradiol, or it is equivalent to 1 milligram of estradiol valerate. So now you can calculate, suppose you have been giving or starting your patients from 4 milligram in a day of oral tablet, and you want to switch over to gel, then you would be giving 2 pumps in the morning and 2 pumps in the evening, and that is equivalent to 4 milligrams of oral drug, what you would be given. Now, if you have, say, 2 pumps coming in, and if you feel that the volume of the drug is more, then what she can do is she can divide it into 2 areas, and she can maybe apply to 1 pump on the left side, on the right side, and then it will take little quicker time to absorb this drug as compared to applying a larger volume in one area and then waiting for it to air dry. And this needs to be stored at room temperature, so you are pretty comfortable. Patients can even carry them to their offices, and there shouldn't be any problem in that. So now what about the oral dose, which I said, I normally start with either a 4 milligram or a 6 milligram. My reason of starting a little higher dose is because it suppresses the normal ovulation. So this escape ovulation is a problem which could occur if you start lower doses of estrogen. Very low dose of estrogen was a good regime if you were using a GnRH analogs before starting estrogens. However, since years together, we don't use this. We straight away start patients on 4 or 6 milligrams of estradiol valerate. And then you also want, in the later follicular phase, a little higher levels of estrogen, because it mimics the rising levels of estrogen in a natural cycle. So if we can go back into the physiology, we will realize, and we will also remember, that in the middle or later part of follicular phase, the estrogen levels, because the FSH peak is there, it rises, and that is the time where we are looking at a dominant follicle. So this is exactly what we are trying to mimic when we are talking of rising levels of estrogen by giving a little higher dose of estradiol valerate. So how do we monitor an HRT cycle? So if you start from day 2 or 3 of a menstrual cycle, I always like to call my patients on at that time. Do a transvaginal scan. It is very important to look at the endometrial thickness. Now, specifically in PCOS girls, if the baseline endometrium is thick, do rule out endometrial hyperplasia. Please postpone your cycles. You can do an endometrial biopsy, but don't start HRTs in a woman whose baseline endometrium is more than 5 or 5.5. The other thing what you could do is you can interview her that was the shedding proper when she came on day 2, day 3. Maybe we are looking at a phase where the woman did not have a proper shedding. So call her back after 2-3 days. But by day 5, the endometrium should have been less than 5. Then I also want to look at any pre-ovulatory follicle. If there is a large follicle, you can do a baseline progesterone to know that there is no premature progesterone rise. Though in a frozen embryo transfer cycle, if the ovaries are quiet and endometrium is thin, you don't need to perform any hormonal test. You can straight away start them on estrogen. So you start them on estrogen, the dose what you have decided, whether 4 milligrams, you can give it for 5 days and then increase it to 6 milligrams. Or you can start with 6 milligram and say after about 7 or 8 days of the molecule, you call her for endometrium. If the endometrium is suppose 6 milligrams, 6 millimeter, I would continue the same dose. I will call after 3 days. And the moment my endometrium crosses 7, I would be happy if it reaches 8 and above. But somewhere between 8 to 11, and that is the time where I will add the progesterone. Also, you will add the progesterone looking at whether your labs are working on the weekends. So you can calculate the days of embryos, postponing your embryo transfer when the endometrium is ready in these cycles by 2 days here and there does not make a difference. So what you would do is the moment you know that the endometrium is nice, triple line, and what you wanted, then look at, then you start the progesterone. Now this I have shown is a typically day 5 embryo. So for a day 5 or a day 6 blastocyst, I would give progesterone for complete 5 days. On the 6th day of morning, she will take her progesterone and come to the lab for embryo transfer. And then you would do an ultrasound guided embryo transfer. And then I would continue the same dose of estrogen. In some centers, they reduce the dose by 2 milligram, which is also okay. And you continue progesterone. Normally in my lab, we give 800 milligrams in 2 divided doses. Certain centers, they give 600 milligrams in 3 divided doses. Some centers, they give 200 milligrams 3 times. So you can decide what you want to give. But by and large, most of the centers give between 600 to 800 milligrams. But if you're using a polycarbophil gel, then one application of 90 milligram is good enough, and that will be taking care of the luteal phase progesterone. So normally I don't like to add 2 or 3 progesterones. They basically go on vaginal progesterones. If they are allergic to vaginal progesterones, then they can go on subcutaneous progesterone, or also we have oral dydrogesterone, though there is not much of a study in frozen embryo transfer cycles when it comes to dydrogesterone. So this is progesterone, and then you have to remember that estrogen continues, estrogen will not be stopped. So it is not necessary to monitor estrogen or progesterone levels to start an HRT cycle, but serum progesterone may be measured to detect escape ovulation. So we are looking at, say, suppose after 10 or 12 days of estrogen, you suddenly see a 15 millimeter follicle. Then you know that, yes, maybe this is a functional follicle. You can make use of progesterone, otherwise you will end up canceling the cycle. If her progesterone is low, then we know that the endometrium is not prematurely exposed to the progesterone, and you can continue this cycle. So the next big question, which still even in India, I see many centers they use, that should GnRH analog be added before starting HRT in an FET cycle. So either people give 1 depot of triptorelin or a leuprolide, or they continue a smaller dose, how we would do it in a fresh cycle, in agonist cycle. Now the concept is adding GnRH agonist. Advantage would be that yes, it will prevent spontaneous ovulation and a lower cycle cancellation. But the disadvantages are higher cost, less patient friendly, because on a daily injection, she's taking many injections. And the most important, disadvantage is that it has no added benefit when it comes to pregnancy. And that is the reason that now GnRH analogs are discouraged. The only indication where I'm using a prolonged downregulation, even before frozen embryo transfer, are my few subset of adenomyosis, where it acts like a medical therapy for them and maybe improves their implantation. But there is no other indication where generally I use a GnRH analog. So patients are very happy, and I think we are looking at a better compliance for these patients. So, but For example, you wanted to time your donor cycles with the recipient with the donor, then you could have put the recipient on OC pills. You could have given, GnRH analog before stopping the pills, say 4 to 5 days before. So basically, typically what will happen is when your donor is expected to have periods, before 3 to 4 or 5 days before, you stop the recipient so that she starts her cycles earlier. She needs to start her estrogens about 4 or 5 days earlier than the donors, because the donors will quickly get ready for egg collection. So then what you can do is that after the egg pickup, in the meantime, your recipients are on estrogens escalating dose. On the day of egg pickup of donor, that is the day of expected ovulation, you can consider. So though that is the day, from there the recipient can be started on progesterone, and then you can plan the embryo transfer the same way as you would have planned if she would have gone through her own cycle. So the whole aim is, if you have put your recipients on OC pills, stop the OC pills say a couple of days before the donor is expected to have a period, so that the recipient can be on estrogen while the donor is on her stimulation. Now, what is the Cochrane evidence which says GnRH agonist? And if we can see the forest plot, it doesn't, cross the unity. And so from multiple studies, what it was said that there is no difference in pregnancy rate, whether a GnRH analog was used or not used. So again, I would not really encourage the use of GnRH analog. When to plan an embryo transfer? Now, when do we plan? So endometrium thickness, which I said 7 millimeter or above, is favorable. So any endometrium between 7 to 11 is ideal. However, even up to 14, it's okay. But any endometrium above 14, yes, I will be a bit doubtful in transferring. Length of follicular phase. Now, this is a question which is asked, that how short could be the duration of estrogen. I have certain patients where I know the endometrium forms very quickly. And in those patients, I don't start them with the standard dose. I start them with a little lesser dose, like 4 milligrams, and I keep them on the same dose. So generally, it was said that the length of follicular phase exposure to estrogen did not affect the pregnancy outcome. However, there was a study which said a shorter duration of less than 7 days might increase the risk of early pregnancy loss. And so normally keeping the follicular phase any time between 12 to 19 days, I would say even 10 days it's okay, is all right, and it does not affect the pregnancy rate, the implantation, or early pregnancy losses. And starting a higher dose of estrogen, 4 to 6 milligrams, will suppress the follicular development and again will not affect the internal endocrine environment. So to summarize HRT cycle, what you do. From day 2 to day 3 of menstrual cycle, estrogen is started. When endometrium crosses 7 millimeter, progesterone is introduced. For example, for a day 5 or 6 blastocyst embryo transfer, which is typically performed on the 6th day of progesterone, for day 3 embryos, on 4th day of progesterone, we perform the embryo transfer, and the luteal phase support is the usual estrogen and progesterone. Now, nuances during HRT. Of course, the HRT cannot be without problem. So the only problem what we sometimes come across is that during ultrasound monitoring, if a follicle emerges, which is 14 millimeter and more with a good endometrium, then you monitor your E2 levels, you monitor LH, you monitor progesterone. If the LH is more than 13 and progesterone is more than 5, you know that the ovulation has started. And if the progesterone is more than 3, then it is very difficult to judge that how many days that the endometrium has been exposed to this progesterone. So in that case, I may cancel this particular cycle. And if this is happening to the same patient again and again, that there is an escape ovulation, then yes, you can give them a GnRH suppression followed by HRT, and you will be able to overcome this problem. Now coming to natural cycle frozen embryo transfer. I think it is the best method for ovulatory women with regular cycles. Simplest method, it utilizes endogenous sex steroids to prepare the endometrium. Now, how do you go ahead performing a natural cycle embryo transfer? So number one, you have to make use of spontaneous LH surge. So detection of LH surge. So baseline scan can be performed, it's optional, or you can call the patient directly on day 10 to 12, because that is the time you are expecting a follicle, which would be about 13-14 millimeters. And we know that spontaneous LH surges do not generally happen before the follicles are about 13-14. After that, you will have to do a serial follicle monitoring, and you will have to perform a daily urine LH test. If you are not very confident on urine LH, then yes, you may have to perform 2 or 3 times blood LH and progesterone. So when do we perform a natural cycle FET? At positive urine LH, we know that the expected ovulation is 36 to 40 hours. So I'm so sorry, this was 24 to 36 hours. So basically you give 1 day of time, and then from the next day you can start progesterone. And you can look at documented ovulation on ultrasound, and you start progesterone from the day of ovulation. So today the urine LH is positive, call her the next day, and you can look at ovulation. The moment she has ovulated, you can start her progesterone from that day. So this is how a typically cycle would look like. Either she has telephonically contacted you on day 2 of the cycle, and then you will straight away call her on day 11 or 12. You can do a blood test, or you can do a urine LH. Do it daily till the time you track ovulation. The moment you track ovulation, and that is the time you introduce your progesterone, and then the progesterone is the same 3 completed days for day 3 embryos, and do it on the 4th day. 5 completed days, and do the embryo transfer of a blastocyst on day 6 of the LH. Now, if you are looking at a completely natural cycle, you need not give them progesterone. Sometimes, yes, in our IVF cycles, not sometimes, most of the times, we'll end up introducing a small dose of progesterone from the day of embryo transfer. So basically, you look at LH surge, you look at ovulation, and that is the day of ovulation, and you count 5 days. And on the 6th day, you can call her for a blastocyst transfer. And then usual would be, if you're transferring a blastocyst, you would do a beta HCG after 11 days of embryo transfer. If you have done a day 3 embryo transfer, then you call her after 13 or 14 days. Now, disadvantages, of course, if your patients are not from your city and they are traveling long distances, it will cause some problem, because they might have to cancel a couple of cycles. You may not be able to detect ovulation. Daily estimation of LH could be required. There is a large variation in urine LH kit. Sometimes you get a 30% false negative result, and sometimes there could be difficulty in detecting the LH surge. So if I have a patient, like we have patients who come from Afghanistan, then I know that I may not be able to depend on a natural cycle for such kind of a patient, and then I will go on HRT cycle. But if I have a patient who is very much from Delhi and in and around, who can come for multiple visits, then I think for an ovulatory woman, natural cycle will be a good option with excellent pregnancy rates and minimum medication to the patients. Now, moving ahead, what I like over and above an absolute natural cycle, I like to give an HCG trigger. So instead of, just waiting for a spontaneous LH surge, we can actually, administer HCG. And that HCG can be administered when the follicle is between 16 to 18 millimeter, provided the endometrium is good. And then you can perform progesterone, which can be started from the expected time of ovulation. So for example, patient comes on Monday morning and you see that follicle is say 18 millimeter, you give her an HCG, and from Wednesday morning you start the progesterone. But the only thing is that in these kind of cases, sometimes, yes, you will have to do weekend embryo transfers. If your labs are completely closed on weekends, then what you can do is you can actually, if you know that your embryo transfer will fall on a Sunday or a Saturday where you are not working, you can actually add a small dose of gonadotropin and give an antagonist. You can postpone your HCG day, and then you can plan ovulation, accordingly. But you may have to do a progesterone level or an serum LH level to plan to tide over the weekends, and which is the easiest thing, with HRT cycles, because you can tide over your weekends easily. And then you plan your embryo transfer absolutely as what I have said for the stage of the embryo, what have been frozen. So advantages of modified NC-FET, of course, less monitoring as compared to natural cycle and less cycle cancellation. But again, these cycles can have unexpected ovulations and cycle cancellation rates could be up to 12%, which you have to be prepared. So if patients are not from your city and are only coming to your city and staying, then maybe this may not be a very helpful method for these particular patients. Now, what is a word about luteal phase support in NCT? Well, in 2010, the author suggested that it was not required. But in 2011, the author suggested that higher birth rate in patients receiving luteal phase support. And the reason was this, that they proposed that 10% of patients, even in natural cycle, will have a luteal phase defect. So if you ask me personally, leaving aside, the evidence, yes, in a natural cycle or in a gonadotropin induced, cycle or a letrozole induced cycle, I like to add about 400 milligrams of progesterone, so 200 milligram twice daily after embryo transfer, and I have a bit of a more confidence in doing that. Now, Lee et al. Failed to show any added advantage of progesterone in luteal phase. So what they did was that they administered one dose of HCG, which is to trigger ovulation, and they administered one more HCG 6 days after the embryo transfer, or no, on the 6th day after ovulation. And they said that these two molecules were good enough because HCG has a longer half-life, and so there was no need to add any progesterone. Kim et al. Again in 2014 failed to show any difference whether LPS was added or was not added. Now, FET, I'm just coming to the last few slides, 3, 4, 5. FET by endometrial growth using ovulation induction. Now, this is a practical problem that there are certain subset of PCO girls who just fail to show a good endometrium despite the highest dose of estrogen. And there are certain women where you don't want to give high dose of estrogens. And these are the women where ovulation induction will be a good method, because endogenous estrogens, even though they are lower than exogenous estrogens, but they make a better endometrium. Sometimes our oral molecules fail to go and act on the endometrial receptors as compared to the endogenous estrogens. So my experience is, though I do not give letrozole very, very commonly, somewhere I have a little preference to go on to gonadotropins if they are not forming, but letrozole should be the first choice over clomiphene, because here we are looking at anovulatory women, and in clomiphene about 10 to 15% can have an anti-estrogenic effect on endometrium. So if I have to choose an oral ovulogen to make a follicle grow and then look at the endometrium, I would choose letrozole. But do not use very high doses, because we have seen that very high doses of letrozole can in turn suppress estrogen so much that in these women sometimes they can have breakthrough bleed, or they could have a little thinner endometrium. So you do a baseline scan, you give letrozole 2.5 milligram from day 3 to day 7, you repeat the scan on day 10. You can also add low dose gonadotropins, in a letrozole cycle if you know that she's a very, very strong PCO. Suppose she gets only withdrawal bleed, that letrozole may not work, then you can add small gonadotropins, but keep the dose to such an extent that you don't have multiple follicular growth, because these women can land up in ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. 5,000 IU is good enough in HCG when follicle is 18 to 20 millimeter. Progesterone is started about 36 to 40 hours post HCG, and plan embryo transfer as per the stage of embryo. Now, gonadotropin cycles, of course, use of low dose gonadotropin. If there is a PCO girl, and there are certain androgenic PCO girls who fail to form endometrium with other regimes, they do very well with gonadotropin. But of course, before that, you should have done a hysteroscopy, and you should have at least looked at any end organ damage. If you know that these are just refractory endometriums, then using low dose gonadotropin would be a good option. Go slowly, target at only one follicle or maybe 2 follicles. There would be certain very, very difficult PCO girls who might even need up to 225, but be very cautious, or poor responders, or some women who may not respond. But by and large, with 75 units of dose or 60 units, I like 62 units in a pen, they can dial easily. So you judge your patients, make a follicle, monitor the same way I said for letrozole. And then in these cases, I do make use of estradiol levels, because in the back of my mind is also ovarian hyperstimulation. But if you're using low dose, then you be assured that they will not land up with this problem. And then putting single embryo transfer is a good option for these women, especially if you're looking at blastocyst transfer and you want to avoid the complications of multiple pregnancy. If you frankly ask me before I end that do adjuvants really help? Yes, we do give aspirin, but there is no as such role. We do not give vaginal sildenafil. We do not give low molecular weight heparins in our patients. I think patients need the right protocol if they are given the right drug, the right regime, and the right choice. And if there is no end organ failure, then most of the patients will form an endometrium. There will be a few subset of patients who will never form an endometrium, maybe crossing 6. Please go ahead and do transfer, because a lot of patients in that subset also will get pregnant, because still we don't know what is the lowest cutoff of endometrium where the pregnancies will not happen, because even pregnancies have been reported at 4.5 millimeter endometrium. So don't give up. Surrogacy may not be an option, in most of the countries. And so we need to go and try and help these patients. So to summarize the direct protocols of FET, now what I want you to go through is the first line, that if you are looking at fresh cycle, we are looking at a transvaginal oocyte retrieval. So this is the reference point, okay? When we do an FET, we look at that what would have happened if we would have done the egg collection for this girl. So that is called day 0. And then you count 1, 2, and 3. So this is the place where you do a day 3 transfer, day 4, and day 5. Now, what happens in an HRT cycle? In an HRT cycle, you basically mimic the same, but you give estrogens. And the day you give the first progesterone is basically called the day 0, which is like the day of egg collection. You give progesterone for 5 completed days. On the 6th day of progesterone, you do a transfer. If you're looking at modified natural cycle FET, you give an HCG trigger when the follicle is appropriate. And then after the HCG trigger, you basically start progesterone after around 36 hours. And then you go, so you basically from HCG, you calculate 7th day. And that is the time where you will do your blastocyst. A word, whether you are putting a day 5 frozen blastocyst or a day 6, they both behave as day 5 blastocyst. It was just that day 6 blastocyst was a slow growing blastocyst, so it was frozen on day 6. However, the days of exposure of progesterone will remain absolutely the same, what you would do for a blastocyst. And the last is natural FET, where you would make use of LH search. The moment it is positive, you know that the next day she will ovulate. And so you will plan your embryo transfer with a lesser window as compared to HCG of exposure. Or if you're not even giving a progesterone, you just count your LH surge and you do the embryo transfer on the 6th day. But when you're giving an HCG trigger, you do it on the 7th day of HCG trigger. No need to give progesterone. And this is how you will achieve your target. I hope most of your queries. I would end here, and then I'm open for questions.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving very insightful lecture and taking us through various protocols and showing and giving us practical points. On behalf of viewers, I thank you. And there are many questions to you. I'll be taking one by one. Could you please talk about the likely cause of failed FET cycle and preventive measure for it?
Okay, so it's a very broad term, because the likely cause of FETs, number one, if we are looking at most common, is embryonic, very common. Are we dealing with embryos made of an advanced maternal age? What was the quality of oocyte? Were we dealing with very severe sperm factor? What quality? So because quality embryo grading is still very subjective, so I would say that 70% of the failure causes they lie. But yes, if repeatedly embryo transfer, say the embryos made in my lab or a particular lab, 2 blastocysts fail to transfer, then I will start investigating. And yes, in my investigations, one would be a hysteroscopy, a 3D ultrasound, a hysteroscopy, and I also perform endometrial receptivity array assays, ERA. So to some patients, I want to know the window of implantation. And then now is also the role of chronic endometritis. If you can rule out chronic endometritis, very difficult to diagnose.
Right. And in that case, with chronic endometritis, how do you go?
Okay, so in chronic endometritis, basically you see plasma cells. There are different methods. Then you can have CD counts. Very difficult, because still now I have hardly come across reports even from my robust pathology department. But if you have immunohistochemistry, then you can look at it. Now you also have these tests called ALICE and EMMA, which look at the lactobacillus and the bacteria, and they give you the antibiotics also, whether they will respond to doxycycline or metronidazole, or they would respond to some other antibiotic. So basically, you need to do that. Otherwise, the recommended dose is, the drug is doxycycline for 14 days.
Correct. Can premature progesterone elevation also occur in FET cycle? And if yes, what can be done?
So, if you don't see a follicle growing, then you don't have to worry. But if you see a good follicle growing, which I said in my presentation, then you can, monitor progesterone levels and LH levels. If your progesterone is more than 1.5 or has gone above 3 and LH is more than 13, then maybe you can skip that cycle.
And which protocol achieves better pregnancy? And did you measure progesterone and LH at the day of transfer? And any preparation need in cycle before cycle of transfer? That's okay. But which protocol achieves better pregnancy?
Okay, so I actually wanted to add one more slide, which is very recent by Labrata in 2019, where they are saying that individualize the frozen embryo transfers, where they are measuring progesterone levels on the day of embryo transfer, and they are saying that if the levels were less than 9.2 nanograms, then by giving one subcutaneous dose, you will be able to rise the progesterone level and better outcome. So this is something. We do not measure in our lab any progesterone or LH on the day of right now embryo transfer. And for me, both the regimes are very good. For ovulatory women, a natural cycle or a modified natural cycle gives absolutely the same pregnancy rate as HRT cycle. So we have analyzed our data many times, and we are very happy with all the regimes.
So you are practicing almost all the regimens, or any specific?
So letrozole is something which is not featuring much in our regimes.
Correct, ma'am. Estrogen progesterone is used only in premature ovarian failure, or can be used for all patients?
So if you are using HRT cycle, then you will be using it in all patients, because you don't have any corpus luteum in these patients. There is no endogenous progesterone coming. So for any reason, even for normal ovulatory girl, if you are using an estrogen cycle, then you have to add progesterone. So the only two cycles where you may not add are natural cycles and modified natural cycles.
Correct, ma'am. Which cases of OHSS where you can do fresh embryo transfer, which cases you prefer freeze-all, and which cases you have to freeze-all from your experience?
Okay, so my experience says that if there are 25 follicles, and irrespective of whatever the levels would be, I would freeze. But if there are about, say, 15 to 20 follicles, then I would look at the E2 levels, and I would look at the ovarian picture on the day of oocyte aspiration. If I see a lot of moderate size follicles, and if the patient is not symptomatic, then what I would do is I would wait till day 5, so that 5 days I'm giving to the patient to observe her symptoms. If she doesn't have any symptoms, then I can do a transfer. And then I would do a single embryo transfer.
Okay. Then what about the mature follicle which are developed if we use letrozole induced endometrial cycle for FET?
So it will be like a normal follicular growth. How you would do it in a natural cycle, you will monitor the follicle, you will make it reach about 17, 18 millimeter, and then you will trigger with an HCG. And then you can plan the embryo transfer.
Right. And what is your protocol for patients of endometriosis planning for FET?
So, in a normal endometriosis, I use the standard regime of HRT. But if I'm dealing with an endometriosis who's had 2 failed embryo transfers, or a patient who has some adenomyosis, then I even use prolonged downregulation even before frozen embryo transfer.
So you mean to say you will be using
Depo for 3 months, 3 to 6 months it has been recommended. I usually use it for about 3 months, and then I plan an embryo transfer with an HRT cycle. So after the last dose of Depo, I call them after say about 2 to 3 weeks. That is a time when their E2 levels are very low, endometrium is quiet, they are amenorrheic, and then I don't wait for a spontaneous cycle, I start HRT.
Okay, ma'am. Then they are telling, we are sorry, the net was not clear, the time of start of progesterone and how many days?
Okay. So this is a very commonly asked question. So see, let's presume patient comes on a Monday morning. Okay, and she comes to your OPD and the endometrium is 8 millimeter. So I immediately start progesterone. I'm just giving an example. So I would start from Monday, and if I have a day 5 or day 6 blastocyst, I would give it for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then in my lab, the embryo transfer will happen on a Saturday. Okay. Now, if your lab is not functioning on a Saturday, you want to overcome, then instead of Monday, you start the progesterone from Wednesday. So if you start from that, you can overcome. So basically, you need to calculate that 5 completed days, and then on the 6th day of progesterone, they come for embryo transfer. So we typically do them in the afternoon. So our patients take the morning dose and then they come.
Again, they are asking, what is the best protocol for severe case of endometriosis?
I think the severe case, you have to judge. If it is severe adenomyosis, some patients will be benefited with surgery and adenomyoma debulking. But if suppose you know that is severe endometriosis, I think the first embryo transfer, I would do like a normal HRT. If it is not working, then I would go for a prolonged downregulation, because it is also the drug, the side effects of the drug, and the number of months the girl has to wait.
How do you manage thin endometrium in FET cycle? Do you use subcutaneous HCG or sildenafil or so?
Okay, so I have actually used, because in India there is no low dose HCG. We don't have any 400 unit. Now, very recently, a recombinant pen has come where the minimum dose is 250 unit, what you can give. So this I tried in 1 or 2 patients, but I would do a hysteroscopy. I've tried GCSF. I don't see that it works. I have tried in very few patients PRP, but I think these are to be done in proper research settings. So other than that, yes, you can add a vitamin E. We can add, low dose aspirin. You can try that. And then there will be certain patients where if there is no endometritis, there will be some patients who always form a low endometrium, like a biconjugate uterus. Sometimes they have low receptors, or a uniconjugate uterus, where you will have to transfer at a lower endometrium.
Correct, ma'am. And when and how do you add estradiol gel in a patient in whom you have started with oral estradiol?
Okay, so what I would do, suppose she's taking 6 milligrams of oral estradiol. So I will add initially 2 pumps, or I can add 3 pumps along with it. So I have actually increased the dose, and I have not increased the dose of oral. Or sometimes I reduce the oral drug and I will increase the gel.
But in which case you will add this?
Only those patients after about 13 days of oral estrogen, if I don't see an endometrium growing, or in 1 cycle, I have seen that even despite 3 weeks,
Correct.
she never, showed a good endometrium, then you need to give adequate time for the drug to work.
Correct, ma'am. You said you transfer single if you find 15 or less. That is what the question.
No, my statement was that we believe in single embryo transfer because we want to avoid twins, multiple pregnancy. But yes, if 15 follicles, if the E2 levels are less than 3,000 picograms, then I can think of fresh embryo transfer.
Correct, ma'am. Can we reduce the dose of oral estradiol after embryo transfer?
Yes, you can. So there are certain centers who reduce it by 2 milligram. So they were on 6 milligram, they make it to 4. It doesn't make much of a difference.
And do patients normally have breakthrough bleeding while the patient is on estradiol is reduced? And if yes, how to tackle?
So, if you are not drastically reducing, or if most of the times the breakthrough bleed, what I saw was when patient did not take her medicine properly, or she skipped for a day, she had some function at home, she was busy dancing in the function and she forgot to take it. So ask the patient, but if patient is persistently having breakthrough, then number one, you can do a serum estradiol level. Either the body is not achieving the threshold. Look at the endometrium. Is the endometrium still thin? If it is 4 or 5, it can break through. If persistently it is having, then you should also look at things like polyps. She might need a hysteroscopy later on. So 1 or 2 cycles you can observe her. And if there is a patient problem, or in these specific cases, in the next cycle, I will, change over to like a transdermal gel. And if they are ovulatory women, I will change my regime. These are the women who will need oral ovulogens or gonadotropins to make endometrium, and they will not have a breakthrough bleed.
Correct, ma'am. If the endometrium not respond well and remain thin, what is your plan in next cycle?
So I would get a 3D ultrasound done. Number one, you need to know, has she had any first trimester or mid trimester miscarriages with a dilatation and curettage, because that is the biggest culprit in the patients. And of course, tuberculosis, we don't see that many. I would still say that it is most of the times Asherman's or intrauterine adhesions. So get a 3D ultrasound done, rule out adhesions. You can do a hysteroscopy. If everything is clear, I would start with a higher dose of estrogen. So I'm going to weigh. I'm going to play between 2 or 3 drugs. The 4 regimes I have said, and maybe I will have to try all of them for a particular patient. And then whichever regime the endometrium is best, I will transfer in that.
Right, ma'am. And they are telling we have been differing FET in progesterone if it is greater than 1.5. Is it
so in cryo-ET cycles, they have said, I had heard a lecture by Obaldi or someone, I don't remember, where they said that baseline in FET cycles, this progesterone does not have a detrimental effect. And that is the reason why people are not measuring anymore in cryo-ET cycles. But yes, if you are measuring and if it is really high, then maybe you can defer, because if you have measured, then you need to take an action.
Correct. And what is the ideal time to measure progesterone if they are measuring before FET, and how do we interpret?
So, if the follicle is about 16 or 18 and you are going to give an HCG trigger, that is the time where you will measure progesterone that day. So as to decide. In a estrogen cycle, I hardly ever measure progesterone. I don't see, unless there is an escape follicle which is growing.
We have come across studies on use of GnRH agonist for support of little phase support in fresh cycle. Is there its role in FET cycle?
Okay, so that is a very small dose which is used on around day 6 of embryo transfer, 1 milligram 3 times. We did a study in antagonist cycles in fresh transfer, and we did not find any benefit, because in a fresh frozen cycle, because there is no corpus luteum, so the beneficial effect which is from the hypothalamus and on the corpus luteum is not existing. So GnRH analog, that short doses, may not have an added benefit in FET.
And this is again the same cutoff value of progesterone before starting progesterone in FET. Before starting progesterone.
So, you can still go. There are different values which people have mentioned. Some have mentioned about 14, 15 nanomoles. I would say if it is below 2, I will start progesterone. If it has crossed 2, I will not.
Right, ma'am. And if patient get pregnant, for how long you continue estrogen and how long you continue progesterone?
Okay, so I continue my cycles. Most of my patients, I stop all the progesterone and estrogen between 10 to 11 weeks.
Till that time,
that is the transition. Yes, till that time I continue. Sometimes I reduce the
same
so
dose.
So progesterone I continue the same dose, and estrogen I slightly reduce, but you can continue the same dose, because they are anyway on, most of my patients are on up to 6 milligrams.
Correct, ma'am. And they are asking why not use sildenafil in thin endometrium?
Okay, so I haven't really seen much of a result with that, and I still feel that rather than using on few patients, we need to do very proper trials. Also, a particular vaginal molecule is not there, which is particularly been made for vaginal absorption. I think there are still oral tablets what we are using for vaginal use.
And what is your experience on use of platelet-rich plasma, PRP, putting into uterus to improve endometrial growth and receptivity?
So I personally feel my experience says that I have used it in few patients, but they were those patients who were not showing endometrial growth for an year also. So there were these true thin endometriums and it hardly ever showed a growth in endometrium. But if you are putting it in a patient who's transiently shown a thin endometrium, say in one cycle, then I don't think this is the proper patient selection, because if you would have changed your protocol, then maybe they would have just formed an endometrium with this drug. So I think very large and better studies, there are promising studies, you can use them, but I think you need to conduct your own study. And then you use them or take a consent from the patient as an off-label use.
Are you strong believer of ERA test? If you had a choice of performing PGTA or ERA, what do you prefer?
So the first test for me will be PGTA, undoubtedly, because embryonic causes of failure is much larger than the uterine cause.
Correct, ma'am.
And I would, before PGT, do karyotype of husband and wife, because sometimes they are carriers of balanced translocations and they form very poor embryos and poor implantation.
And in a mild stimulation FET cycle, what is your method of progesterone administration? Do you prefer triggering and relying on endogenous progesterone or exogenous?
So I said that I actually end up giving 200 milligrams twice daily.
Correct, ma'am. According to your experience, which route is best for progesterone administration in FET protocol?
Oh, still vaginal. I can't think of other. Though our oral dydrogesterone is promising, but we need a lot of studies in FET. It is Lotus 1 and 2 is still in the fresh cycle.
Right, ma'am. And do we need, what about luteal phase support in natural cycle FET?
So see, the evidence does not support the use of natural cycle, but yes, if the patients have shorter luteal phase, I would say that, adding a small dose of progesterone will not harm them.
In patient with progesterone resistance or with, say, endometriosis, do you give more progesterone support?
I haven't come across this terminology of progesterone resistance, because progesterone resistance would mean a breakthrough bleed before the pregnancy test. How would they clinically present? They will present with a lot of bleeding. So maybe those are the patients on whom, of course, you're going to land up adding some injectable. But I don't see a difference in our progesterone support even in endometriosis.
No difference. Okay. And if you are using the gel, do you use in FET cycle the single day administration or twice a day?
Okay, so now in India, the problem what we were seeing was that with once a day vaginal progesterone, the patients were having some bleeding issues. So in many patients, yes, we do twice a day. And the instruction is that you put it in the morning, the first dose, and let the patients move so that this gel gets absorbed. So in very hot climates, yes, you can see breakthrough bleed with in these patients.
But practically, you use, if you are using vaginal gel, it is twice a day in FET cycle.
Yes, most of the patients is twice.
Correct, ma'am. And too much of progesterone, does it harm the embryo?
So, we did a study, no, not harm the embryo, but too much of progesterone definitely affects the liver enzymes. And we saw that in our IVF pregnancies, there is an increased risk of cholestasis of pregnancy to women who were exposed to progesterone. So different molecules, I don't think, because we do not monitor liver enzymes, if we monitor, we will know that what these progesterones are doing.
So thank you, ma'am. There are many questions.
Thank you so much.
And the viewers and all IVF specialists are thanking you. That was very practical lecture. And I thank you on behalf of my team, INTAS. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for this important and informative information, and for your big hearts to accept this, a lot of questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I hope it was clear. I hope it was simple.
Yeah, so many questions.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
Very clear answer. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sonal. Thank you, Mr. Janardhan. Yeah, we will.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch over the phone.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thanks.
We'll leave the
Thank you,
meeting
Dr.
now.
Manal.
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am.
Bye bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.